to the next panel at the convention. This is the Mapes brothers, the Mapes Diaries. Now, you may notice that there's only one Mape across the stage from me. That's because conventions are complicated things and the other one's busy. And we couldn't get another one out of storage, so that's a shame. So Steve, Dave? Steve? Which one are you pretending to be today?
If I can be Steve, you can be Dave, and then we make it.
That works out perfectly, doesn't it? Give Steve a round of applause. So I mentioned at the opening ceremony that this was really a panel talking about collecting, deep diving into the world of collecting and really looking at it through the lens of a group of collectors who have been involved in collecting really since, well, Transformers started. Quick show of hands, bearing in mind that I'm struggling really badly to see you all. How many people were collecting Transformers back in the 1980s? How many? Keep your hand up if you never stopped. So, there's a few of you. Yeah, you, exactly. And so I think for people like myself who were a big fan back in the 80s and then dropped off, only to come back to it, you know, many years later when I realised, you know, wasn't going to hit it with the girls, never mind, so we'll go back to the toys. You know, you started in the early 2000s, finding eBay, things like that, whereas you, Steve, Dave, this is going to be really confusing, have been collecting throughout your entire life. So, where do we start?
At the beginning of this, yeah, we knew we'd never be popular with girls, so just kept on buying toys. So there's only a few slides to go through the kind of prompts really, and what we can do is sort of break down into a few date ranges. So 84 to 96, 97 to 2000, 2001 to 2007 are kind of what we're going to look at. So very briefly, just to give you a little bit of a background of what it was like for us in the 80s and the early 90s, when obviously Transformers were popular out. So we started getting Transformers in 1986, and in the summer, our parents got us two Transformers, Hubcap and Cosmos, purely because my favourite colour was yellow, and Steve's favourite colour was green. They were available, that's what we got. We didn't get any more Transformers until about Christmas, and we got Brawn and Spindle, and several Go-Bots, because they were a bit cheaper. And that kind of continued from there. That got us into the toys, we got into the comics quite quickly, and into the cartoons. One of the things which was a little bit different probably for us and a lot of fans is that our parents also got into reading the comics and watched the cartoons. So you'll see there's a few letters in there from various Mapes or Mapes. They were actually all written by my mother during the time. She had, I think, 5 letters or 6 letters published in the comic, and a little story on the front of the comic published as well. I also had a letter published in the Panini Armada comic under a friend's name of Adam May, aged 6. At the time he was probably 36. There's a few other little, some letters on there by some names you may know. I don't know, Dave, do you recognise any of these other people here?
There's a Matt Dallas there. There's, is that St. Martin? Oh, James Roberts from St. Martin. I was thinking, well, that's an odd name. Yeah. It seems like there's quite a few people that we might know that actually wrote into these letters pages.
There are, yeah, the James's letters, as you can see, were quite long and very well written. maybe
Some things never change, do they?
So, yeah, in the 80s, we grew up, our parents would buy some toys, we would save our pocket money, buy toys from various places. We were also very fortunate that there was a car boot sale literally at the end of our road, and at the car boot sale was either a shop owner or a Hasbro employee who would sell sealed Transformers 1 to 2 years after they were released, and we would go there and buy them. So they would be, well, they were £6 at the time or £9, probably a bit cheaper because they were in a car boot sale. So we would get various G1 toys, say in 88, that was released in 86, all brand new. Same for Action Force. He sold various different Hasbro lines, so
And I suppose that's one thing, like if you're a new fan coming into the hobby, you know, especially if you were born mid-90s or later, you're going to end up in a situation where Transformers has always existed. When we talk with guests, and I'm sure you'll probably hear this from some of our guests this week, is whenever you ask the question of, well, did you think you would be here 30 years later? The honest answer is always no, because as far as they were concerned, it was just product that they were putting out. So the idea that some rogue Hasbro employee is selling Transformers in a car boot sale, that was probably just overstock left in a warehouse.
Yeah, it's probably stuff they couldn't get rid of. Staff sale maybe, and he decided I'll take a few cases of this, a few cases of that, and then sold them for some extra cash at the time. There's a couple of little images in here. So back during the 80s, obviously you would buy toys as they came out. Moving over to the late 80s into the 90s, our family got into just comics in general due to Transformers. So our mother and our sister primarily went to Marvel comics, pretty much every Marvel comic that came out. We had an almost complete collection of Wolverine comics by the 90s as well, which we sold, probably should have kept. So then we jump a little bit to the mid to late 90s. So this is where things got a little bit more interesting. So how many people in the room know what teletext is?
How many people in the room have never heard of teletext? All of the youth. Very jealous of.
Teletext 382 was the sports pages on BBC. There were 3 different types of teletext: CFAX on BBC, teletext ITV, and the Oracle on Channel 4. And it was a bitmapped text service which came through your television, through your aerial. The reason why we've got a picture on it is that is how we found out about Beast Wars.
Long before the internet, long before press announcements and things like that, Beast Wars was, the news for Beast Wars was on teletext.
So the review of the computer game that came out. So we read about this, I think it was Jan or Feb of 97. It says Transformers, I don't know what Transformers Beast Wars is, so we'll read about it. The next month or so, our college gained internet access, and you'd go and sit in the teacher's room just to use the internet for maybe 5 minutes on things on the Yahoo browser. And on the left, you'll see what the internet used to look like, with all its many images of grey and text. So we'd go on, they'd ask you to search on something. We were interested in Transformers, so we searched on Transformers, Action Force, GoBots. Found a few websites. Oh, there's some information on here. That's nice.
It's an interesting thing as well, isn't it, that within the UK there was only about a 6-month gap between the end of G2 and Beast Wars starting. Like, we never had a period here in the UK where Transformers wasn't available at some point. Somebody once told me, and this always sort of sticks in my head as a really random fact, because this is how we in the UK really understand the concept of time. There was only one Argos catalogue ever produced that didn't have Transformers in it. And I thought that was a fantastic fact. Like, you know, but that's it. So it was constant for us, even though in America it dropped off the shelves early 90s and then didn't come back for several years until Beast Wars.
And like for us, from just like a personal story, we had Transformers every year from 86 until now. The sad issue, which obviously we're told, was 1993. For our birthday, I bought him a model car. He bought me Flash, a Transformer, and he said he was really disappointed with me because he really wanted a Transformer as well. So he only told me that story this year. I would say I feel bad about I got the toy. Which I break. So in 97 we learned about Beast Wars through teletext, and then a couple of months later we found an advert for a local toy shop or collector shop, so second-hand toys called The Box. So we went down there and they had various second-hand Transformers for sale. A couple of months later they had some Beast Wars toys, so we bought Beast Wars Dinobot. we hit July, we did our exams, so we did our A-levels. The last day we went back to the computer room, went online, did a search. It was M-Cypher's toy list, so just a pure text list, and Robert Young's toy list at the time, printed it out, and that was our checklist for what toys we had. And from there we'd highlight which toys we had to work out there's other toys that we didn't have, a lot of which weren't available in the UK. But we had this checklist of what was there. We could go to this collector's store to try and buy some of the ones that we were after. I then started work in September, earning the scary high amount of £6,500 a year. And pretty much all of our money was spent on toys. Back then, my work didn't have the internet, we didn't own a computer. But I was buying toys from the US, primarily through a company called Digital Toys, or Band for Trading. There were a few other places as well, the original Wheeljack's Lab. And what we used to pay at the time was, at the top, it looks a bit like a cheque, but it's called an international money order. So you go to the bank, it would be written out by a cheque, you would then send it over to the States, and they would send you toys. Problem was, a lot of toys we were buying from Digital Toys, my only way to communicate with Mike around the store was through email. So I would contact him about toys, and we would swoop from some places and other toys. And we'd buy the toys we sort of knew. And one day he contacted us and said, got a transformer I think you may be interested in. It's a little bit like Soundwave, but it transforms into a chrome dragon. Would you like it? It's called Deathsaurus. We thought, well, it's a dragon. That sounds cool. Okay. So we bought this toy, not having a clue what it was, didn't know what it looked like, until it arrived. Weirdly, on the same day as we also got Double Dealer and some other toys at the same time.
I've got a toy that looks like Soundwave, and it ends up being Deathsaurus. Is that, the breast boss, yeah.
So how to describe it? So it was just, and mine was very good for us, so we bought Deathsaurus, we very quickly, you'll see later, bought Star Saber, and we got Beast Wars 2, Beast Wars Neo from him, Car Robots. It was sent over scans and stuff.
So did you know, when you obviously mentioned there about not knowing what Deathsaurus was, but you had a list of transformers. Did you even know things like the Takara, the Headmaster and Super God Master Force? Did you even know these shows existed back then?
That's a good question. I don't know if they were on the toy list. I'd have to find it. I think we do still have a printout somewhere. It's probably very faded because it's almost 30 years old. I'm not sure. I know with Deathsaurus, obviously, you had the toy sheets, and so you can look at those, and then Star Saber, Roadfire, it looks really nice when it's drawn in an anime style, and then you can buy the toy and it's very blocky.
So was your mentality, yours and your brother's mentality back then, we're just going to work through this list, it's just a completionist list, we're going to own everything that's on here, because again, you have no emotional attachment to something like that sort?
Yeah, it was kind of, we had, I think, like 300 odd Transformers by the early 90s from kids, and it was kind of get the ones that we didn't have. We had a rule that we would never buy any recolors, which didn't stick for too long. But yeah, we just bought the toys that we liked, or characters from the show we knew, so go and get Blaster, Swoop, Nor, and then if it looked cool, we would buy it. We'd go through the Japanese characters, we're basically looking at the toys thinking they look really nice. So we were just going to do it. There's actually an example of the GoBot list on the top of the screen. What I've also done, just to give people an idea of what the world was like, there's a bit of a timeline sort of covering this period and a bit further through. So this was 97. So there wasn't Google, there wasn't, eBay just about, well, eBay US had launched, eBay UK didn't launch until later on. We launched our own website in 99, I'll cover it in a second, but there was no Bookspot, there was no TF-Wiki, there was no Wikipedia. If you wanted to find out something, you had to go and get an actual Wikipedia. Back. MTM Expo didn't run, so it was a very different world. It was the world of 22 and 56k modem, hence why the internet didn't have many pictures on. So in 99, after buying toys online, we decided to build a website because we were trying to find pictures of these toys on the toy list that we didn't know what they were. We couldn't find them. But then we found there were toys that we owned that we couldn't find online. So we thought, okay, we'll start a site, just put pictures up online of what they are in case someone else wants to find them. And it was around this time that I started dealing with a lady in a Maryland military base, which is a bit of an unusual story. So on this toy list there was an email address which I contacted, which I thought was the person who ran the list. Turned out to be her son. So I was randomly emailing this child from the UK, asking them questions about the toy line, which doesn't necessarily sound very good in the modern day or age, but the woman, I think her name was Evelyn, if I remember correctly, she was really nice, and what she would do is she would go online and she would email me back pictures of different toys, and she actually sent me the complete profiles of...
Right, start the panel again.
So yeah, so I would contact Evelyn. She would send me back all the G.I. Joe profiles, all the Transformers profiles that she could find online, paste them into a Word document. This was all through my work email, by the way. I didn't have a PC at home, and I would print them out and take them home. So we had all the profiles coming through, which was just something you couldn't get at the time.
Yeah.
So we started our site. There's a few images on here. Does anyone know where the images at the bottom come from? Have you seen them before, Dave?
I've seen them before, but does anybody want to shout out?
I recognize them, but I don't remember where they're from.
So the bottom ones were from Bench Press Comics. So in the 90s, they announced they had the Transformers and G.I. Joe license when they didn't. Because Hasbro was still trying to get it back off Marvel. So these were some of the released images, same as the Jazzit picture, and there were some others of the Dinobots. Then we got a bit of continued Generation 2, run by Transmasters, sort of softly connected to Toy Fu now. Our sister was a member of Transmasters US through the late 80s, so we were getting letters from people like Tony and Frito trying to buy toys from us. If that's a good idea. So we went and did the same thing, went through the comics and online ads and started writing to other people. And we picked up like a minting box sound with £15 from someone in Wales.
Yeah, so this is basically the world you're living in and trying to collect it at this point, where you're sending random emails off to random email addresses that you might randomly find on the bottom of a sheet, while also sending letters to fan magazines. So
yeah, it's very much, you would go through classified ads in newspapers, we would go to sort of toy shows, go to the box where it was our local collector store, buy toys from there, and you just kind of, any means of trying to get these toys. We didn't think anyone else would like Transformers.
yeah.
Gone again. We didn't really care, we liked it, we just wanted to buy them,
Yeah.
and then we started our site to sort of share the toys.
Okay, so one of the reasons that you're great to talk to about this sort of stuff is because the Mapes are meticulous.
Well, that's the next slide, so...
It is. I've completely shot.
We have. We'll come back to that story later. So we'll still carry on the timeline. So we jump over to 2000, 2001. So this slide is to talk a little bit about our relationship we had with Part 1 Limited, or more commonly known as eHobby Shop. So in the early 2000s, we started to import and sell toys and comics. Comics originally from Transfandom, and then later on through a Diamond Comics account, and we sold Dreamwave Comics. We also partnered with eHobby, and we were the only people in Europe selling eHobby toys. There were a couple of people in the US selling them. At the time, the US...
Can you just, for the sake of anybody who might not know, what exactly was eHobby?
Okay, so eHobby originally basically did some of the packaging designs for Takara, but they were a shop in Japan, or an online store. Speak generally completely Japanese, they now only sell to the Japanese market, but between 2001 and 2007, they would speak to Westerners, if you knew how to, and you could approach them. So we approached them again, just through email. They had toys that came out, we wanted to buy them. And so what we would do is, on our old Pro Boards message board at the time, we would say, right, we're going to go and buy this new gold jazz and silver blue streak toy. Does anyone else want them? If so, we'll order more. You can pay us, we'll ship them to you. And so we started to import the e-hobby toys from that time. From the very first e-hobby toy up to the Black Wonderfest exclusive, which was also sold by e-hobby. At that point, e-hobby were no longer allowed to sell them overseas. But because we'd worked with them for 7 years, the staff members sent me one. Well, we've got a few eBay sold auctions here to talk about the prices. At the time, if you were buying, say, a standard Autobot car in the States, they were $150. Do you know how much we sold them for?
Go on then.
Click the button. Okay, click it again. £35, and that was the toy, shipping from Japan, customs, and postage to your door.
Wow. Do you still sell Transformers now?
So Fire Guts was £65. We bought a case of Fire Guts. Only 3 people wanted it when we bought it, and we had 6, and it took us 6 months to sell the other 3. Oh, how the world has changed.
Yeah. Shall we move on? These are the meticulous notes.
Yes.
So part of the reason that I wanted to do this panel was because I know that Steve and Dave have since... When did you start with this?
So the book we started meticulously doing it since 1997, which is when we have really collectors, not just kids or teenagers buying toys. But we did have some notes from earlier. We also had some earlier notes that our mother would make in her diary of what she would buy us at certain times.
So this is a set of diaries that you own, which has every toy that you've bought since 1997, the date you bought it, the price you paid for it, all of that.
It's pretty much, we became lazy over a while, but it's one book. It's actually a 2000 diary, so the dates don't really tie up, which makes it interesting. But what we would do is write down on the day, the year, what we bought, how much we paid for it, and in some cases where we bought it from. And then, is it depressing or not how many toys we bought in a particular year? The peak, I believe, was 2002, 2003, when it was around about 184 toys in the year, which is probably a bit ridiculous, but it's quite cool to look back on and see what we bought when. And so we've got a little list on the left-hand side, so World, Thunder Clash, Pyro Stalker, Metal Force Primes. They're August 99, that was from Popcorn Europe. Grand Max we bought in 2000. So 23 years ago, Rock and Breakdown 2001, Blue Bacchus in 2004. And then the larger list, we're going to play a little game of how much did it cost.
This is where you're going to get sick.
Hopefully they're worth a bit more now than what we paid for them at the time. I actually don't know because we bought them and they haven't looked since. So we can work away from them.
Yep.
So G2 Dreadwind, the double pack of the Jets, one of my favourite toys. In '96 was $9.99. Now, I will say all these toys which are on the list are the prices we paid when they were in the silver box as well, just to give you an idea. So G1 Brainstorm in '97. Anyone got an idea what that would have cost? Yeah.
20.
Can I take a guess? Is it 40?
Look.
Hey!
Do you know why?
It's
written there.
I was going to say, some of them are, aren't they? I believe actually, Dave, something here, is it at the top? So the top corner, you may not be able to read it, is our Fort Max we bought in 1998. £350. The next day, Triptychon arrived from the US. They were the first 2 toys of that year that we bought.
Right, where are we now then?
On Fort Max and Triptychon.
Oh.
So I'll just give you one answer.
Yeah.
Triptychon from the US, what would it have been?
70.
Wow, I'm hearing vastly different answers here.
Number 120.
You ready?
Yeah, let's have a look. 100.
Way! Somebody said 120 over there.
Yeah, and £40 worth of postage and package from the US. Star Saver in 1999.
150.
Right?
151.
200 pounds.
Closest.
Double header.
Slight difference from Star Saver here.
Yeah, somewhat different. Yeah, you can't even buy a HasLab Star Saver for £200. Right, double header.
What the fuck is double header?
It's the next one I can't wait for.
£20. Yeah, so this was the European Overlord.
European Oval.
European Overlord, not Japanese.
So, ready?
Okay.
People are going to get angry. No, that's not bad. So when would that have been? When would you have bought Overlord?
99, it would probably, I think it was one of the, could be Transformers. 99, can't remember.
Yeah. So this is roughly at the start of the UK Transformers conventions.
Yeah, so the first conventions in the UK, Transformers 99 in Croydon, and then BockOn Europe 99 in the church with Simon Furman.
Yeah. Clench.
61.
I like somebody said 61 there. Somebody's playing The Price is Right rules. Right?
Come on down.
£35.
Oh, right. So we're in the 2000s now.
I mean, it's also interesting looking at the years of when we got these toys. So we've kind of gone on to Japanese because we have most of the US stuff by then. So yeah, Star Convoy in 2000.
Is that an original or a reissue?
This would have been many years
I was going
before
to
the
say,
issue, wasn't it?
many years before there was a reissue.
Yeah.
But by 2000, there hadn't been any, or other than New Year Convoy. Maybe it was Red Alert and Namor. Yes,
Yeah.
these are all original.
Star Convoy.
It was quite expensive.
And what would anybody know what a Star Convoy, an original, would go for these days? Just out of curiosity.
A lot more.
Yeah, that's a fair point. Oh, right. Grandest.
The block. I don't know how much it goes for now.
Well, yeah,
More than that, actually.
more than £160.
So the Breast Force and Dino Force, these are individual prices because they're listed in the book number of like X amount each. So these were on a particular day when they came through, and again they're mint in seal box. When we bought them. This is from I think Andy Warren. He used to buy this from Japan. His wife was Japanese, so he would come back from Japan with various toys.
Breast Force would go, you bought for £60 each.
Wow.
And then Dino Force.
How many members of the Dino Force is there again? Six? Six, yeah.
40.
£12 each.
£60.
Price.
And again, the point is, these are all mint in box.
Yeah.
Like,
The next one is quite popular toy now, Black Shadow.
yeah. Black Shadow went for £250. Yeah. Long before James Roberts brutally murdered him.
Back in the day where so when we first watched the Japanese cartoons, it was through a media called Real Media, and they were 300 pixel videos in green screen. We then got, I can't remember, I don't think they were the Star TV dubs. They were the Star TV dubs. My friend Gareth, who's here, painfully watched them and swears that's what ruined his eyesight back then. We then got the Japanese version. We used to watch the Japanese shows, and I know we did this with Beast Wars 2, with an English overview of the episode, and then just watch it in full Japanese text, not really knowing what's going on, but making up stories in our own head, trying to tie into what this summary said.
I think some people have a, this expectation that, Transformers has always been around, as I mentioned before, and things like that, but it is those funny stories about when fans first realised back in the day that Transformers was more than just that Saturday morning cartoon that you watched. You talking about that, I remember when you go into the dealer hall tomorrow, Paul Hitchens, who runs the Space Bridge, he was at one of the very first conventions that I ever went to in, I think, 2001, 2002, and at the back of his stall is a portable DVD player with a screen no bigger than your mobile phone, and on it he's got some of the Headmaster episodes. And I didn't know Headmasters existed. And I'm staring at it going, I'm sure that I've never seen this episode. And the reason I'm sure is because I've spent the last 6 months downloading all of the G1 episodes via LimeWire on a 64K modem. Incidentally, if you want to know what the hardest episode was to get, it was the core of all things. But yeah, and suddenly you would realise, wow, there's like more shows, and then you would desperately wait for Chris McFeely to get the DVD box sets out, so you could watch them and realise, ooh, that's a bit awkward.
It is that thing that, like with you saying downloading it, but how we got real media, some bits through some other stores, like some of the Japanese shows, you get it, but at the time you're downloading things on a modem. And unless you were around that time, so if you were born after the 2000s, you'd have no idea on that lag, or how long it would take to upload images or download things, let alone video. It would take you a very long time.
The only reason that I ever watched Beast Wars was because I bought a toy off eBay and somebody sent me a bonus item that contained a CD with all of the Beast Wars episodes in real media format. That was considered a random bonus item.
So speaking of random Beast Wars CDs, we have a Chinese VCD series of Beast Wars, which has 3 languages, English, Chinese and Japanese at the same time. And the way that we worked on our computer to work out which sound it was you had to unplug each speaker until you got to the English one.
Yeah, things were a bit more complicated back in the day, so where are we at now? We're at still 2001, Sky Gary. Shall we see how much you paid? 125 pounds. I think we've beaten everybody into submission.
So jump over to the next one. A lot of it sort of a bit quicker. Some we talked about earlier on. So 6 Nights was loose. We've actually got from Paul Hitchens.
Oh, right, okay. What are we looking at here? £60.
And I would admit, when I put this list up, Steve couldn't remember who 6 Night was.
Now, Tango Tank, one of the greatest Transformers of all time. £40. We're getting £40 from the front. Ooh, close.
From Andy Warren. What? The Rescue from Jet is the European version of the exact. Didn't have a chef name on the card.
Didn't have any combiner ports, anything like that, yeah. £25. I remember once at a convention, somebody had found a whole set of boxes stuffed in the back of a warehouse, and it was full of those jets. And they were selling them for like £20.
Duke Conquest Super Convoy, the black Power Master Optimus Prime. The next one, Duke Conquest Super Convoy, the black Power Master Prime.
£55. And you were trying to sell a Super Guts.
Yeah, so this one's got typo. It should be Chrono Cube or Chrome Cube. I can't type. So Chrono Cube makes on the small guy. If you listen to Triple Taker recently, Mass has pulled a couple of the Chrono Cubes. Those small little minifigures. £11.
Okay, so here we go. Fire Guts God Jinrai. So this was the one we were talking about before that you imported. And couldn't sell for 6 months. £65.
And it does make me laugh that you see a lot of people talk about Godfire Guts, Shining Magnus, they're quite popular now. Piss Magnus is his name. we bought him when he came out from Japan, so he would have cost probably again £55 when we got him. Ranger, do you know who Ranger is?
Ranger is one of... Why are you asking me? Why are you putting me on the spot? Ranger's where the Supergun Master Force? Yes!
Yeah.
I instantly looked at Chris's head to see if he was nodding. Let's have a look. Ranger, £75. That seems quite expensive. I mean, when was this? 2002? Oh, well, yeah, the show's been out 10 years at this point.
And again, around this time was when a lot more people were starting to come online and prices seemed to go up a little bit. So God Neptune from Beast
Good.
Do you?
God Neptune. Oh! It's not competitive at all.
And there's the last two, Burning Convoy, which is the red clear, Beast Wars, Primal.
£30.
So the last one is the movie preview Magnus. Again, in the blue colour scheme. Again, has proven more popular now than what it was at the time. £103 and 2p.
And 2 pence.
That was how detailed our book has the prices down to. It probably must have been rounded at the time, or exchange rate or something. Yeah. There you go.
So let this be a lesson to any parents in the audience. Whatever your kids get into when they're growing up, keep hold of them. Just put them in a box, stick them in the loft, because you never know when they're going to become expensive.
And write down all the prices.
And write keep meticulous notes about everything.
So buy two.
Yeah. Why is it process? I did have I don't think it's taken off here, but we did have a note on here about when we went to SummerSlam '92 back in the day. And obviously, in a couple of weeks we were off to All In, so we can add that to the ticket we got.
Is that the last slide?
I think that is the last slide.
Well, we've got... Yes.
We can do our bonus thing. You want?
Yeah, go for it. Well, actually, before that, there is one other thing that you guys did find, and I know we were going to talk about it, but I still think it's worth talking about, especially since I see Chris in the audience, because your collecting didn't just stop at buying the toys. You've always, both you and your brother have been just massive collectors of, the fandom in general, but you were able to find... You are David. Your name tag slipped. I knew it. You were able to find audio recordings of the original Generation 1 voice recordings, which had deleted scenes which the actors recorded.
Yeah, and some of the...
Does anybody not know about this? Yeah, there's quite a few. So just to give you a heads up, was it at the first TF Nation, Chris? We did it. So maybe the second one, yeah. So tell us a little bit about how you found these.
Yeah, so that was kind of random. So I was in the States at the time with my now wife for 3 months, just to see did I like LA life and can I go over there to move. Steve was back at home in the UK and had an email out of the blue from a lady saying, "Oh, I've seen your website about the Visionaries show. Did your family used to work on the show?" No, we just like it. So we were talking to her. She said how her father Jim Duffy worked for TMS and had various bits he kept everything he worked on the show. So he had paperwork for Transformers, G.I. Joe, Gem, Visionaries, and they were going to give them away to Los Angeles Museum, so they would go into storage, never to be seen again. And so we'd be interested in getting the Visionaries paperwork if you've got some, because we like Visionaries. This is what you can see from our site. We're doing stuff. My brother just happens to be in LA. She lived in LA. Could we meet up and discuss it? She was a twin. We were twins. She just had triplets as well, which is why they were trying to clear out her late father's garage. So I went along and we picked up various boxes of Visionaries paperwork, some Transformers paperwork. I think Jim got some bits later on as well. And I took them back to my Airbnb in Culver City. So we had maybe 4 or 5 boxes of paperwork. And actually Jim and Bill came over one evening and we ran through it just to sort of showing these things we picked up. Inside one of these boxes was a box of old cassette tapes, just general cassette tapes you used to use at home to record from the radio or whatever. Quite cool, it's got like tons of names on it, don't know what it is. It's a cassette tape. This is 2015. How am I going to play this? Is it just going to sit here? It doesn't even necessarily look nice. So I wonder what you can. So I found you could buy a USB tape recorder. You can plug into your PC and rip the audio off. So I just plugged it in, and I sat at work, doing some work, plugged this thing into my laptop, and I just started ripping the tapes off, not knowing what they were. Now, the way you rip a cassette tape is you hit play and record. And they're 90-minute reels, double-sided. So it takes 90 minutes to record 90 minutes of on the tape. There may only be 10 minutes of audio on there. You don't know until you hit play at the end. So I stood through, ripped them. I played the first one back. More than me still arrived from Cybertron, as I still know it as. And it was kind of sad, I guess, but as soon as it started, I thought, I don't recognise this audio. And I haven't seen that episode probably in 10, 20 years. It just sounds a bit different. So I went onto YouTube, which you could do when you started in the 90s, because it didn't exist. Found the episode, hit play. Oh, well, that wasn't necessarily the words I used. Something slightly stronger. That audio wasn't on the original recording. So I messaged Steve, like, I think we've just hit gold mine. There's unreleased audio on this track. And so I then spent the best part of 2 weeks ripping the audio off onto my laptop, sent it back to Steve, and then he spent a long time going through with scripts that were online, and at the time there wasn't a great deal of scripts online. It's not like Jim and some provided to download, but they published it more, so you could go on, find some scripts, maybe find some storyboards, play episodes on YouTube, and we would listen to the tapes, play it, go through the scripts. That's all. So this is different, right? Make a note, cut the sound out, put them together. All but one episode we have ripped, we put onto YouTube. I think there's one we didn't finish. We also have an episode of Muppet Babies, and about 80% of the background track for Visionaries music.
Wow. Yeah. And so when you found these, what was absolutely fantastic about this, and this brings us back to what I was mentioning there about the second TF Nation, was you mentioned just a second ago that we didn't have an awful lot of the scripts. We've got a lot more now, but we also didn't have a great deal of the storyboards. But we were able to find one episode where we had both the storyboards and these cassette recordings, and we were able to marry the two together, and Chris was able to produce a panel talking about how breakneck the original Generation 1 cartoon came together, and we were able to, back in 2016, 2017, really show people the very first ever deleted scene of what a Transformers, from a Transformers cartoon, which was really fascinating.
I mean, it was a very weird feeling hearing those sort of missing soundtracks back, knowing no one's ever heard this before. Can we release it? Are we going to get sued, number one? And we want to share it with people. But then you also have different clips of background, so there's bits of Wally Bird talking, there's Chris Natter, obviously they're not around, there's bits where different actors are taking the place of other characters, different sound bites, so you get a little bit of a glimpse into kind of the recording sessions at the time, which is so surreal to hear at that point.
Yeah, just a moment in time, captured on a cassette tape that you couldn't play. But yeah. So, one of the other things that I convinced you to do this weekend, and we'll show them off, you may have noticed these black robed cabinets. So, I think what we should probably do is just set the scene a little bit here before we unveil them. So I said to Steve and Dave, we are looking at a panel and we're looking at a lot of concept toy designs, which is coming up a little bit later today. And I said it would be really interesting to have something to go along with it. Do you have these toys, because these are the guys that would have the toys. And they were like, yes. And so I sent them a list of toys, and they turned around and went, but we don't just have the toys. So, we won't tell you what toys they actually are, but well, should we take them? You do that side, I'll do this side.
If you start with...
I'll start over here. Okay.
I will do that one last, Dave, personally, but up to you.
Right.
You doing both?
It's that one that's really interesting.
So, to give you...
Is that a prototype Thunderclash you have over there?
Oh, yes!
Yes, so very quickly through this category, we have the grey prototype of Thunderclash, built from a designer. We've got a test shot of Machine Wars Prime. There are 3 stages of test shots of Stalker. Grey prototype, first engineering pilot, second engineering pilot, and some concept design, which was done by Andy Cousins originally, and the final Italian release version. The 2 motorfades at the bottom are hand-painted samples, the original ones which came over from Japan to Hasbro UK. Andy Cousins worked with designers to hand-paint them to get that European colour scheme. The prototype of G1 Sandstorm, the box edition. The ones which look very similar, so there's 3 throttle bots. These are R&D samples from Andy Cousins. The Battle Charger is again an R&D sample with hand-painted windshields. The bottom part, you've got the original line art for the Mega Pretenders, and then some Action Master Elites. So the Action Master Elite one on the box was about that big, and that was the original drawing. In this cabinet, there's also something else which is great. So you've got a complete collection of great prototypes of both the Atlas Speeders and the Stormtroopers. And the original plastic bubbles that the prototypes were kept in. Line art for the characters, test shot for Drench, some more line art, some line art for Rotorstorm at the bottom. On Dave's side, the first cabinet, so there's 8 Atlas Speeders and Stormtroopers in total. This cabinet has a lot more than 8. It's different packaging art, so you've got the US versions on the top, a couple of UK versions, Italian, Portuguese, Spanish. So a lot of times now you get quad language in Europe. Back in that time, you had English language to English, dual language for different places within Europe. And finally, you have the concept boards. So these are packaging art. And then over this side. So these are uncut proof cards for the 2 American releases. The European Decepticons at the bottom. Another unproof card, and then these are actually transparent tracing paper, but they're line arts for the characters. So the very first step when doing the box art, and there's a transparency in the middle. Dave asked us to bring along 8 toys, and we said we'll fill up 4 cabinets.
I said 1 cabinet. 1 cabinet, I said. And he brings all of this. So, obviously, you know, these will be on display all weekend for you. I believe we are going to be moving them out into the foyer area tomorrow, but they'll stay in here for tonight. So, and I think, unfortunately, that does it for us, because I think we've run out of time. Yeah, perfect. So, big round of applause to Dave. And Steve, whoever you may be.